Few companies show as much brand loyalty as does Road Metals of Canterbury. They put to work some of the first Macks to reach New Zealand and did the same with Volvo, and they still have both brands working in the fleet. These trucks sit on the shoulders of rigs that have gone before them. We're lucky enough to get a glimpse of some of those rigs, as current Road Metals Managing Director Murray Francis often carried a movie camera with him on the job. Murray shot some fascinating footage during his driving days when he was working for his father, Stan Francis, during contracts around the South Island. Road Metals evolved from several different company names over the years, but the colours have remained the same. And this late 1950s lineup has 5 TS3 diesels, as well as a Thames Trader and an S Bedford, all of which would be lucky to make 120 horsepower on a good day. This long-nosed Thames Trader is dragging a screen through Black Creek on the Linders Pass in 1974 and shows pretty well. Murray shot some fascinating footage during his driving days when he was working for his father, Stan Francis, during contracts around the South Island. Road Metals evolved from several different company names over the years, but the colours have remained the same. And this late 1950s lineup has 5 TS3 diesels, as well as a Thames Trader and an S Bedford, all of which would be lucky to make 120 horsepower on a good day. This long-nosed Thames Trader is dragging a screen through Black Creek on the Linders Pass in 1974 and shows pretty well what you had to do to get the job done in those days. Murray Francis still looks back fondly on this 8x4 Leyland Octopus, which he was driving in the early 70s. It had 186 horsepower and was a big beast for the day, but he learned to love his Macks more when they appeared on the scene. Road Metals did a lot of work in Fiordland during the 70s and are seen here helping put down the airstrip with their G88 Volvos and ERFs. Deer recovery operations were just starting up in those days, and the region has a real frontier feel about it. Road Metals got numbers 2, 3 and 4 of the first 4 Macks to come into the country, and Billy Sargent, seen in the opening sequences driving the number 2 Mack, is still driving today, 32 years later, in his latest Mack. When the Macks arrived in the early 70s, Murray's father Stan Francis was told he was crazy to spend $40,000 on a Mack when you could buy 3 Dodges for the same money. Stan became a legend in his own lifetime down south and was an innovative thinker and one of the first to recognise the value of the Mack and the sense of putting bigger, more capable gear to work rather than having a large fleet of smaller vehicles. When it came to sell the Macks off years later, they sold for what they were bought for, and Murray shudders to think what the Dodgers would have been worth on resale. Stan ran 4 bottom dumpers in the fleet and also had 9 yard noddy trailers behind the 12-yard capacity 8-wheelers, and together with the tipulators, the Road Metals fleet had a lot of flexibility. These Macks were working off-road and pulling 40-tonne payloads, but Murray said the 285-horse Macks handled this kind of abuse with no problem. The Macks redefined what was expected of a truck in the 70s, and Murray is still extremely fond of the brand. Despite the rough conditions the Road Metals crew found themselves working under, they had very few mishaps. But like every operation, disaster can strike. This Mack was jackknifing while tipping when it fell over. But once they pulled the cab back into shape, it was driven back to the yard for repair. Harry in 1977, and this Mack ended up on its side in the swamp and proved to be very difficult to get upright. They had to borrow a log skidder and pull the truck out, but luckily, due to the swampy nature of the ground, the Mack was undamaged and didn't even break a mirror. Some of the toughest work the company has done was in Milford Sound, where they undertook a lot of rock protection work. The company went in March 1979 and came out in November after being trapped by an avalanche for 3 months. There was a 10-tonne limit on the bridges on the way in, and the gear had to be stripped down to make the crossings. The Homer Tunnel is particularly prone to closure by avalanche, and Road Metals struck a bad year on this contract. Fuel, spares and other necessities had to be flown in by helicopter. Flying in the fuel was the easy bit. Those drums had to be poured into 1,000-gallon skid tanks. Murray said, "After that contract, our gear just limped home. Everything took a hit or was worn out, and it was one of the most awful jobs we've ever undertaken," he said. Only those of us who have been into Fiordland during the worst it can dish up and seen firsthand how appalling the weather can get can understand what this job would have entailed. They can get up to 12 metres of rain a year and nothing stays dry, even in the summer. But that's trucking for you. Thanks for watching, and that winds up this edition of the Truck Files. We hope this has given you a taste of how diverse trucking in New Zealand can be, and we look forward to bringing you more of the same on the next edition of the Truck Files.